Well, howdy doody, geographers. Welcome back. It's time to talk about management of water. How can water be managed? Well, let's find out. Some learning goals for EOL. Firstly, you're going to know how water can be managed in three different scales. Ooh, I used a concept word. Domestically, so that's in your own house. Nationally, so how can Australia manage its water better? And internationally, how can we manage water better across borders? Not easy. And you're going to be able to interpret maps. So your activity for this lesson is going to be a map of the Murray-Darling Basin, and you're going to answer some questions about that. We shall begin. Water management. So here's a fact: we can't make any more water. We can only manage it better. All the water that's on Earth now has been here since water first got here. How did water get to Earth? That's a random tangent. But basically, scientists think that a comet, like comets have like heaps of ice on them often. They reckon that a massive comet slammed into Earth and all of the ice that was on that comet melted, and then we got the water. If we didn't have water, there'd be no life. Gotta love that water. Not that that's water, but anyway, it's a Mountain Dew. No, it's a monster. Moving on. Right. In terms of water management, if you can remember that farming uses like 70 to 80% of all water. So if we want to manage water better, we need to manage farm use of water better. So for example, irrigation, that's putting water on your farm to grow crops or whatever, can waste 70%. So you chuck a litre of water using irrigation, only 300 grams of it actually gets into the soil. The other 700 grams fly off as like, when you're hosing your garden and you think how much flies off as steam and doesn't actually hit the plants properly. That's irrigation wasting water. How can farms improve the efficiency of how they use water? Here's a few ideas. They could recycle water. We could desalinate water. That means to take salt out of seawater and turn it into fresh water. Or we could start using stormwater. Stormwater, right? So before concrete and cities, when it rained, all of the rain would just soak into the ground. You wouldn't get that much flooding. You might get a little bit of flooding. These days, think about big cities, all of that soil covering where the rain used to be able to soak into the soil can't do it anymore because concrete's in the way. And so you have stormwater. When it rains nowadays in big cities, you have all this stormwater, all this water that's not soaking into the soil, and it just causes flash flooding, which is like flooding that only lasts like an hour. Perhaps we could harness that stormwater. Maybe we could capture that stormwater and use it for agriculture. Who knows? There is a major problem with managing water across borders. Once you've got another country and they've got their own ideas about how they want to manage the border, it's bad enough managing water across state borders in Australia, let alone different countries. And some of the hot spots where countries have got to manage water across borders include the Nile River in Africa, northeast Africa, particularly Egypt and some of the countries that border it, the Mekong River, which flows through lots of countries in Southeast Asia, and in Australia itself, the Murray-Darling Basin that goes across 4 states and 1 territory, and they're always squabbling about it. It's always in the news, the Murray-Darling Basin. That's just to give you, just so you know what I'm talking about when I say irrigation on farms, like big scale irrigation, yeah? Heaps of water being pumped there, and it's sprinkling. And see, in terms of efficiency for irrigation, what you really want to do is you want to get the water into the soil. But what we end up doing is sprinkling water in the land on top of the soil. Yeah, some of that water gets into the land, but a lot of it just blows away or goes away as water vapor, and that's why I was saying that up to 70% of irrigation can waste water. I mean, some irrigation wastes 70% of its water. Yeah. You can see it happening now. This is the Nile River, so there it is there. It goes through Egypt, it goes through Sudan, it goes through Eritrea, Ethiopia. So you've got all these different countries who all want some of the water from the Nile, and so it's difficult. Here's the Mekong. So there's the Mekong River there in blue. It goes through China, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. I've even seen it. And so you've got all these different countries who've got all their own farming styles and people, and they all got their own water needs. And how do you manage that between countries? It's not easy. Pardon me. Because I've been to the Mekong, I'm going to show you some photos that I took when I was there. There's the Mekong River, very, very wide. It was a pretty skanky day the day I took that photo. And here's me cruising on the Mekong. Nice. Right, let's talk about the Murray-Darling Basin. That's what MDB stands for. I don't want you to have to write down heaps of stuff, so I'm summarising it for you. I'm such a nice guy. Takes up 14% of the land of Australia. It's in those 5 places: Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, and the Australian Capital Territory. There's a lot of conflict over water use in the Murray-Darling Basin. So the Murray-Darling Basin is a basin. It's got the Murray River and the Darling River. They're the main bits of it. And there's heaps of different water users in that area, and they all want the water. The farmers want it to grow food and livestock and rice and cotton, which uses heaps and heaps of water. The residents want it for drinking, but environmentalists say, hey, we need to leave lots of water in the river for the fish and all the other animals that drink the water in these rivers. So there's a conflict amongst all those groups. It used to be, the Murray-Darling Basin used to be managed individually by those states and territories, just in the bit where the river system went through theirs. That wasn't working out very well because the states will just go, I'm stealing heaps of it, not leave enough water for anyone else. So the federal government, the Australian government that's on top of all these other little states, now the federal government manages the Murray-Darling Basin, but it's still very, very controversial, and a lot of the states and a lot of the individual actors like the farmers and stuff are not happy with how the water gets shared around. Here's the Murray-Darling Basin right there. That's one of the rivers, and you can see all the different uses. You got, it's going through forest, it's going through farmland. Finally, I want you to copy down this table. So here are some suggestions about how we can manage or use our water better. The left-hand column, these are national ideas. We could have more dams, then we could control the flow of water better. We could have more desalination, so we could get more fresh water from the ocean. We could increase the price of water. If you increase the price of something, people use it less because they can't afford it. But is that fair to people who don't have as much money? Maybe not. Possibly we could use more groundwater. We can tap more aquifers and suck more water out of the ground. Domestically, at your own house. Having spoken to a few of you about how long your showers are, shorter showers is definitely something that could save water at your household level. You could put a water efficient shower head in. That means that even for the same length shower you use less water. You could plant native plants. Australian native plants don't need anywhere near as much water. So the house that I live in, when I first moved in, it had all these beautiful plants that were designed for a really rainy Europe. I just let them all die, and then I've replanted them with Australian native plants, and they don't need to be watered because they are used to not having a lot of water because they're native to Australia, the driest inhabited continent. And lastly, in your garden, you could mulch the garden. That's putting stuff on top of the soil so that the water in the soil doesn't evaporate out. It can't evaporate out because it gets to the mulch, so like bark or even grass clippings, stuff like that. Okay. Activity time. Here is a map, and I want you to answer these 4 questions. What elements of bolts are missing? Does it have a border, orientation, legend, title, scale, source? How's my spelling? What bolts missing? Anyway, I'm human. Anyway, what could this map be used for? What does the green show? Now, obviously, one of the things missing on this map is a legend. So what does the green mean? You've got to figure that one out. How far is it from Canberra to Sydney? Using the scale, you can figure out roughly how far it is from Canberra to Sydney. You don't need to look it up. You can just go, here's 200k. So how many lots of 200k get me from Canberra to Sydney? You can figure that one out. Here's a really cool video from the Guardian newspaper about desalination, dams, the big dry the challenges of managing Australia's water supply. Take it away.
The big challenges for Australia's urban water security going forward are related to two things in particular, as population growth and climate change. The impacts of climate change are forcing water utilities to really be able to plan effectively across 4 pillars of desalination, dams, water recycling and water efficiency. Desalination has been around since the Millennium Drought, particularly for Perth. And then gradually, during the Millennium Drought, all the capital cities put them on. For Sydney, once it was commissioned, by that stage we'd had a La Nina event and all the dams are full, they switched off, which is the right thing to do. If you don't need it, you want to use your cheapest supply. It is certainly the most expensive of the water supply options. It is an energy intensive process, but what the water utilities around Australia have done is they'll buy renewable energy certificates, or they'll have agreements in place to use wind power or solar power. And I think that's the way to prove that you're serious to mitigate the greenhouse gas and carbon impacts that you're bringing to that situation. On the East Coast in particular, we're blessed by some very big dams, land and protected catchments. So we can actually keep those catchments clean, we keep people out of them, which means that the water coming into that is of great quality. And I think those dams will go on into the future. There's no new dam sites for the big metro areas. That's plain and simple. Then we move to water recycling. Now there's plenty of water recycling happening right across the country. The next frontier though is potable reuse. And that happens in Singapore, it happens in the US, it happens in South Africa, and guess what? It happens in Perth too. It's effectively purified recycled water. So the sewage comes back from the homes, it comes back to a big decentralised wastewater treatment plant. It's treated to usual standards, which is a very high treatment. So by the time it comes back into the water supply, it's ready to drink and it meets all of the drinking water guidelines that you need. The next most important thing is to use water as efficiently as possible. It's a bit like the doing the right thing from the 1980s and stop littering. It's common sense now that people don't hose down hard surfaces. They're using blowers or other means. Also, you want to be watering your garden only in the morning or in the evening. The biggest impact, of course, that we've had is to have water efficient shower heads, which not only cut down on water use, but cut down on energy use, because that's the biggest use of energy in a home is hot water. So our big challenges, population growth and climate resiliency, will be met through using those 4 pillars: water recycling, desalination, dams, and being water efficient.
Reflection activity time. You've done a lot today, so reflection activities real quick. Just write reflection activity, and I want you to pretend that you're a newspaper headline writer and come up with a headline, a real snappy short headline that sums up today's lesson. Thank you so much for taking part in today's lesson, and don't ever forget